So this was trivial, and this just can't be right. But there's a third interpretation, and it's super terrible, interesting. The idea being there is no such thing as the truth full stop. There is only true for people at times. The closest we can get to that kind of truth is just relative truth anyway. All truth is truth for me, or truth for you, or truth for, whoever. This position in brief is all truth is relative. No! Notice how this is different from subjectivism. As Kirk says, this allows too much to be true. Pretty much anything anyone believes is true, even contradictory beliefs, even when they contradict. And we can't have that. So instead for this, disagreements don't produce contradictory truth. He should have said seeming disagreements because this solution is actually denying there is actually a disagreement in the first place. But we'll get to that soon. Say you believe the earth is round, and I believe the earth is not round. He says with this position, there's no direct path to show there is a contradiction of it is true that the earth is round and is not round. For the point of this position is to deny that we're entitled to say it is true that in the first place. There is no case for non-relative truth or the truth full stop. At best, all we can have is true for me or true for the most educated or whatever. And if you're confused by the most educated part here, it might be to think nowadays as the most educated being those who are scientists. So true for current scientists, let's say. Kirk notes that while when we say something is true or false, we usually don't actually use a qualifier like this saying true or false for us or for a community right now or for our culture. But he says that relativists would say that this is implicit whenever somebody is saying something is true or false. We saw this sort of strategy happen in the bar example before, but I'm going to give another visualization to help explain this philosophic strategy that I think is kind of helpful here. So let me give it a summary. For this position, whatever seems to be. But yeah, so what? We're talking about the truth here anyway, not what seems to be. For this interpretation, however, the opposing propositions meet through the medium of the truth, because the truth is more singular and unified. It's monistic, you could say, mono, and thus results in a contradiction, meaning this position cannot be correct, because we agreed contradictions are bad. So for this position, it's the truth as a concept that's causing the problem. So the truth, this conception itself is challenged, and what seems to be can be true even for what seemed like was opposing positions, because the truth itself is multiple, plural for each person, each subject, to whom things seem to be one way or another. So my earlier visualization, as I stated, of the truth being broken into parts is a little bit misleading. What more fairly and accurately is happening that the TFM relativists would say is that there never was the truth in the first place to begin with for it to be broken. That they aren't separating the truth, but that the truth was always separate. They didn't do the separating or segmenting of the truth, but they indeed did do the substituting of the concept of the truth as unified with the concept of truths separate to each person. Now this kind of relativism I'm going to call Protagorean relativism or true for me relativism. Just call it true for me relativism, everyone will know what you're talking about. He says it can be appealing, but how appealing depends on your position. Now, one who isn't too philosophically engaged might not be so restrained in appreciating how appealing it is, because doesn't it sound great? Everyone can have truth. It sounds inclusive. No one has to be told they are wrong. It sounds positive. No one gets to say they are closer to the truth over and above anyone else because there is no such thing. It sounds like there's equality for everyone. No one can have the truth or is closer to the real truth, whatever that is. You can only have true for me or true for you. It sounds humble. This is very appealing, and it should be for familiar societal and social reasons. These are the organs, but don't worry, I'll get into that later in my conclusion. But for this position, TFM, Kirk asks what's good and what's bad about it. So that's the battle for today. The TFM Relativist versus Robert Kirk, and maybe myself in the end. I will be going over 3 attacks Robert Kirk has for the TFM Relativist. First, false belief and undiscovered truth. It's kind of like a two-parter. I think Robert Kirk really thinks that they're closely enough related to be treated as one. Second, disagreement. third, their own existence. And on this third one, I will give my own emphasis and empower the argument into an argument about agency and contrast that position against what I have been calling the organs of this enemy. Now there are some points, 2 or 3 here and there, that Kirk makes that I'm just going to leave out because again, it has much more to do with what I will be talking about in the next episode. So perhaps I will cover them in the end as a kind of segue to the next episode, or put it in the next episode. I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, first, attack number 1. False beliefs and undiscovered truth. One of the main objections to the TFM Relativist is that when we form our thoughts, beliefs, or theories, we're aiming to represent things as they really are, not just what we think or believe about how it appears or seems to us. So that means we think it's possible for us to be right. That is, there is something for us to be right about. But also, we ourselves are forming beliefs about things that we think we can be wrong about too. That yes, we can fail in what we believe is the case, despite what it seems to us. Kirk brings up the example of different beliefs of the medieval times about the size of the Earth to the Sun. He says, for example, in the 12th century, we believed the Earth was bigger than the Sun. Still, despite what it may have seemed to them at the time, in the 12th century, the Earth was not bigger than the Sun. Or at least that's what we would want to say now. But even with that acknowledged, what we want to say now also acknowledges that there is a difference between what seemed to them and what is actually the case. That their beliefs failed to represent things as they are. That our ancestors were mistaken about the truth. That people can be mistaken about the truth. He says the example shows there's much more to truth than just true for people. It highlights the strangeness of TFM relativism. It cannot allow that any sincerely held beliefs are false. Because TFM doesn't allow there to be any difference between how it seems and what the truth actually is, since for them that's all there is, just how it seems to us. There is no objective truth for anyone to connect to or compare to. No truth beyond one's own perception. In TFM, no one can be wrong about what the truth is. No one can be wrong. But we want that. We want to be able to be wrong. And for anyone who agrees that someone can be wrong about the truth, this counts as the first attack on the TFM relativist. To be clear, if you got confused, Kirk shows that for TFM you cannot be wrong, since all truth is just true for you. So saying that yes, you can be wrong would count as an attack on this position. Or at least for Kirk, that's just half of this attack. As he says, a related objection is that we assume there are undiscovered truths that no one has any beliefs about one way or another. In fact, we take what we believe to be true as almost nothing compared to all the unknown truths out there. Truths like how many stars are in a particular remote galaxy, etc. True for me relativists seem compelled to claim that such truths are not true for anyone, hence that there are no such truths in any sense. Whereas subjectivism implies there is too much truth, true for me relativism implies there is too little. By doing so, they also seem compelled to claim that there are no facts about the world other than whatever people happen to actually believe. That is very hard to accept. There's a difference between what is true versus what is believed. Again, the point of beliefs and theories is to somehow or other capture things as they are in some way. If successful, then we say it's true, and if not successful, we say it's false. The TFM relativist needs to explain why this difference is so compelling to us, and explain why we would ever consider a position where none of our beliefs can even be false. So the second part of this attack, as it's shown, is that there cannot be truths which no one knows, undiscovered truths, since according to these relativists, the only truth there is true for me. So for anyone who agrees, there are things, truths, facts that you don't know, or even that no one currently knows or believes, truths which are therefore not for anyone, then that agreement itself is the attack on the TFM relativist. Now you might like this attack, but philosophically it is a little unfair, and for the TFM relativist who understands what happened would deflect this attack, really. They'd point out that false belief and unknowns only seem like attacks because you assume that relativism is false in the first place. They'll insist that no, there aren't truths which are not for anyone. It might be a surprise for you, but I could in a sense agree with him on this in that it is totally in line with their position. But I will get more into what I agree with in my conclusion episode. But for now, I think some of you might notice that I always care to put those qualifiers in for anyone who agrees in both cases. So it might help you to decide if you are a TFM relativist, but for the TFM relativists, knowing what they are, of course, wouldn't agree that there is the truth to be wrong about, or truths independent of being for any person or peoples. But fret not, if you push them on this, it really unveils the constrained philosophic picture they have, and we'll do that soon in this video. Just saying, be careful, don't rush to think that this is enough. Now it's obvious that they will admit it's true, that there is a reality beyond what appears to you and beyond perception so that you can be wrong about, and that there are things that you don't know. Don't underestimate this enemy. Things are stickier than that, because even the sentence, there is reality beyond perception, a mind-independent reality, is just another thing that is true for us. Not true, full stop, according to them. All sentences, all facts can only be truths or facts if conceived or perceived by a mind or a community of minds. Truths can only be true for. But there's a lot of attack left for us if they think this is a solution. At most, it's just a bit frustrating if one doesn't really understand how to proceed from here. But you're gonna learn that here. So let's get going to that second attack. How is disagreement possible? So if you say the earth is round and I say the earth is flat, relativists be like, it's true for you, X, that the earth is round, and it's true for you, Y, that the earth is flat. Therefore, there is no contradiction. Notice the solution is kind of a separation. But if there is such a thing as disagreement at all, then we'd be in it with this. And that's how it would be shown, by our contradictory statements. They are contradictory because they both pick out the same object, and what one says about the same object the other denies. Consider what's being implied. We both agree there is such a thing as Earth. We, X and Y, agree that it exists and that it has a shape independent of what we think or believe. If we genuinely disagree, it seems we are forced to have a realist attitude to the matters we disagree about. It seems that true for me relativists must either abandon their position or grit their teeth and maintain, contrary to the general assumption, that genuine disagreement over matters of fact is impossible. That is another route to the earlier conclusion that they must reject the assumption that there can be false beliefs. So let me just go over that again and state it my way. So even when we disagree and we are in battle, we are still agreeing that there is something, the same thing, that we disagree about. Something we agree doesn't exist only in my mind because you are able to talk and perceive that same thing. Something we agree doesn't exist in your mind alone because I should be able to talk about and perceive the same thing in order for us to have a mutual disagreement about it. We are agreeing that there is something we can both mutually perceive and exists independently of our minds, and this is required for disagreement or agreement to be possible. Indeed, sincere conversation about what we agree or disagree on requires us to have a metaphysical commitment to a mutually accessible reality that therefore exists without dependence on either particular mind. The relativist is denying that reality beyond perception, separating our worlds, and so we are not even talking about the same thing. We are therefore never really disagreeing. This is their philosophic solution to our contradictory statements. They have separated us into our own realms. And in this bar conversation, that goes something like, you two aren't even talking about the same thing, so stop arguing. I'm sure you've seen that kind of thing before, and maybe there are situations where that's applicable, but sometimes it's simply used to relieve the argument to get to that conclusion. Shut up, please. There's a lot going on here with what I just said and what I implied, and it can be made impactful on a number of different areas in philosophy. But we can flesh that out later. Right now we're sticking to Kirk, and he's going to flesh out some of this for us instead of y'all just listening to me, a half nobody. I don't even have a neck yet. Anyway, this attack could perhaps be deflected too in the same fashion as the prior one. Since, of course, they might bite the bullet and say yes, disagreement and agreement on the same thing isn't possible. We've gotten close to that organ attack now, so I'm going to move straight to the section I think hits closest to the organs. So pay close attention and remember the enemy holds this. The existence of relativists undermines relativism. Truth for persons, whoever, me, you, etc., presupposes the existence of persons, an individual whose existence is independent of what people may think. I mean, you didn't know I existed until my best friend AJ introduced you to me. Okay, well, Kirk didn't really call me his best friend or mention me, but the point is the same. Look it up. I have no idea who any of you are, but you exist regardless of whether or not I know you're there, don't you? So does the relativist accept these points? If so, that's enough for their position to collapse, because it makes the following statement non-relatively true. Persons exist independent of what anyone may think, and they cannot deny it. You see, TFM relativists have it that all truth is relative, so this alone is enough to refute them. Now, if they reject that refutation and bite the bullet again, then they are committed to solipsism. Solipsism? Now, this isn't merely a psychological kind of solipsism where you're just an inconsiderate, self-centered piece of shipping equipment, but rather a philosophical one, described by Kirk as the view that oneself is the only intelligent being there is. Now, this from here is where I can lift on to attack those organs, but let's let Kirk finish up his attack before I push on to the next level. A philosophic refutation of solipsism isn't straightforward, but no person could actually be a solipsist. I kind of think that's a soft attack. I'm not really impressed with it. He says it isn't psychologically possible. So I don't know about Kirk, but I think it is possible. He hasn't presented it sufficiently to think that it's not possible where you can believe you're the only intelligent being, the only mind perceiving the world, or rather that reality is just a particular person's perception. I still do, however, agree with what he's about to say next. Quite generally, if your philosophic position implies solipsism, it is untenable. You'll see, if anything, I'll be more emphatic about this. I'll outline exactly why it's always untenable, not just generally, and that's so even when I think it's possible that someone can genuinely believe in solipsism. But let's see what Kirk's awesome move is if they try to bite that solipsism bullet too, like they were doing before. If you still insist on relativism, you might want to say that so what? Solipsism it is then, despite the fact that you don't actually believe in solipsism. Even this desperate move won't help, because even the solipsist accepts that one person exists, the existence of the solipsist themselves, that their own existence doesn't depend on what they think. Just because you think you don't exist doesn't mean you don't. No, just as Descartes shows us, the very fact that you are thinking, or have any thought at all, proves that you exist. For clarification, it doesn't matter in philosophic sense that you psychologically think you don't exist. The very fact that you think at all, one way or another, is proof that you are, that you exist. This is the famous traditional philosopher Descartes' cogito ergo sum, popularly referred to as I think, therefore I am. So even for the solipsist, there is a matter of fact which is independent of what the solipsist may happen to believe. The solipsist must concede that the solipsist exists and thinks, regardless of what that same solipsist's beliefs may be. In the end, solipsism provides no comfort for true-for-me relativism. They are compelled to accept that the existence of persons doesn't depend on what anyone thinks. If other people exist, regardless of what we may think, then, for example, it is true that you exist regardless of whether I believe you exist, even if I believe you do not exist. So there's a vast sea of truths, and those are not merely true for me's. Those are capital T truths. Truths about the existence of actual persons, independent of what you think, or your opinion, or your beliefs, and what seems to you. Since the TFM Relativist says there are no such truths, then for this reason alone, they are false. No one can consistently insist that all truth, everything, including truths about the existence of persons or person, is merely relative. I want to make a few points, then go into my attack. But first, let me thank my Patreons. Slick pockets. So we discussed a variety of relativism called true for me relativism, and I'll list 4 reasons why one takes this position or uses this strategy, and the names don't really matter, these are just what I call them for the sake of presentation here. 1 dishonest reason, 1 sympathetic reason, 1 psychological reason, not that the others aren't psychological or sympathetic, and 1 socially honorable reason. First, the dishonest reason.